Okay. This afternoon, we're going to do two things. Charlie's going to present his future healthcare system, and then we have another case, Greenleaf. Okay? Charlie, you're up. Introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you. So I'm not actually going to present an ideal healthcare system, but I think I'll be a bit more modest than that. But I'm going to try to improve on Israel's healthcare system. So we heard about the way the complex system is constructed by Professor Schuster last week. I will be going over some of that because a lot of the complexities and the problems arise from the basic structure of how it's actually built. So a bit of history, about 150 years ago, still Ottoman Empire. So very similar to what modern day developing countries would look like. A lot of infectious diseases, a lot of cholera, etc. Beginning of the 20th century, a lot of immigrants from Eastern European countries with a strong socialist or communist ideology, has a lot to do with the history of the of healthcare. And they established two aspects of publicized health. One is, and I think Rania can say a lot more than I can about that, called the tipot chalab, which is literally, I think the translation is drops of milk, which provides neonatal care for the whole population, and Rani specializes in that. And the second is the sick funds, which started out with one big sick fund called Clalit, which was established by socialists from Eastern European countries. And as a socialist healthcare, it provided healthcare for everyone, meaning that bring us you're hungry, you're sick, and you're poor, and we'll provide healthcare. In the following 20 or 30 years, there were 3 or 4 additional sick funds which were established by individuals with different political views, more conservative, or more right-wing, or more revisionist, and they accepted members according to their own ideology. So what you had by mid-century, mid-20th century, is you had eventually 4 sick funds, one which was the biggest one, Clalit, which accepted just about everyone, and the other 3 which accepted whoever they wanted. So not surprisingly, you had one with a lot of elderly and a lot of sick people. That was the biggest one. And the other 3 were a lot smaller, and a lot younger members, a lot healthier, etc. That was in the establishment of Israel just about 1948. The way things were paid was direct membership to the sick fund. So it was a kind of a publicized health system, but there was no mandate for health insurance, so an individual did not have to have health insurance, and B, payment was directly to the sick funds. So it was kind of like a membership, and in a sense it was a semi-membership of a political party as well. So there was a lot of political influence on which sick fund to actually buy into. 1973, we start the parallel tax, which means that individuals started paying to the sick funds, and their employers started paying the same amount to the sick funds. So all of a sudden, the employers were part of the game. And this continued until 1995, which is the basic game changer in Israel health policy, which is the National Health Insurance Act, established. It's called the Netanyahu Act. Had nothing to do with Bibi Netanyahu. It was a judge called Netanyahu who sat at the head of the committee. And what that established is actually a system in which you have the Social Security, and Social Security receives funding through the taxpayers and through the employers. Generally, 5% of all your income goes to health tax, but you don't see it, it's not colored money, so you don't see exactly where it's going, but supposedly about 5%. And the Social Security transfers the money basically to one of the 4 sick funds, or they're generally similar to HMOs. So you have a Clalit sick fund, which accounts for about 50% of the population. You have Maccabi sick fund, which accounts for 25%, and 2 smaller ones, Mukhedit, which accounts for 15%, and Leumi, which accounts for about 5% of the population. At the same time, you have this huge regulator called the Ministry of Health, which not only regulates systems, it also owns systems in its own. So the Ministry of Health, first of all, owns most of the hospitals in the country. So the HMOs generally have clinics, MDs as kind of private contractors. The Ministry of Health independently owns almost all the hospitals, or about 75%. which includes general hospitals. But in addition, and again, this I think will be important for the presentation, also smaller hospitals like psychiatric hospitals, like the one that I work in, geriatric hospitals and rehabilitation hospitals, which means that we're already starting to see that there's a huge overhead because you have different kinds of hospitals and these are relatively small. So I'm deputy director of a 360-bed hospital, which means that we have a similar overhead to what a much bigger hospital would have because we have to have a kitchen and we have to have a security staff and we have to have an administrative staff and a financial and a CFO, etc. So there's a lot of overhead going just based on the fact that there are different kinds of hospitals, and you'll see if you're driving even in small rural areas in Israel, all of a sudden you run into a geriatric hospital or into a rehabilitation hospital or in a psychiatric hospital, which historically were all settled in nice rural areas. In addition, Ministry of Health deals with a lot of public health. So, if any of you get bitten by a dog and you're concerned that you have rabies, the person you're going to report to and receive injections from is the Ministry of Health. And the last thing is the Tipot Chalab. Tipot Chalab, which are the drops of milk I mentioned, neonatal care. So you have these two systems in which the Ministry of Health not only regulates everything happening in the HMOs, it also owns its own hospitals, and it sells services to the HMOs. So if I belong to an HMO and I get my regular care through my primary physician, all of a sudden I'm hospitalized, the person paying the bill or the body paying the bill is going to be my HMO. So you have that kind of complex system, and this is only the first part of what we call, in a sense, kind of a four-phase system. The second phase we have is that each one of the HMOs offers complementary insurance, which includes a lot of things like glasses, like dental care, things that aren't covered in the basic basket of services. The third thing is that a lot of us have private insurance, which means that either through our employer or because we're very risk averse, we buy additional private health insurance. And the last is probably most concerning for this presentation, that a third of the turnover of money in Israeli medicine today is completely private, out of pocket. So you have the General Health Act, you have complementary insurance, you have private insurance, and then you have out of pocket. The amazing thing is that this all generally quite works. I have to admit, as someone who lived in quite a few countries in the world, spent a decade in the States, a few years in Canada, in Southeast Asia and in Israel, I'm a fierce advocate, or at least I was until a couple of years ago, where private business really started booming here of the Israeli health system, because it does actually work in a lot of senses, and it's surprising because you can see that one of the things that we have to cut here are huge administrative overheads. You have a lot of small bodies. These are not financially regulated by the Ministry of Health. So what you have is, at the end of each year, Clalit, for example, just reports that it lost 100 million shekels, that's generally what happens. Now, because these HMOs can't go bankrupt because it will be a disaster, what happens is that the government puts its hand in its pocket and pays out their debt. So not a lot of incentive to be financially sound on part of the sick funds and the HMOs. So you can see that there are a lot of small organizations here. And again, like I said, generally always surprises me how well the system works given its complexity. So life expectancy, this is just in comparison to Britain and France, not novel data, but just to show that life expectancy is high and infant rate, death rates are down here. Even in terms of health, this is just smoking. So we're on a good level in terms of smoking. We eat a lot of fruits and vegetables. There are a lot of fruits and vegetables here. So generally in terms of lifestyle, quite healthy, longevity, etc. And even in terms of death due to ischemic heart disease, we're relatively low. Death due to cerebrovascular incidents were relatively low. So again, just to say that this whole complexity, when it translates into clinical practice, actually miraculously works in a lot of ways. Okay, so this is what's covered under the National Health Insurance Act. So you have the employer and employee contributing. You have the four competing sick funds, universal coverage, which includes the standard basket of services, which is negotiated annually. For example, last year, Rambam's CEO was head of the negotiations, which means that you have stakeholders, you have public representatives, you have physicians, you have scientists, which annually negotiate for what's going to be included. So there's a new hepatitis C medication, costs about 20,000 shekels per month, that got included. I was an advocate, because I'm an addiction psychiatrist, for anti-alcohol dependence medication. We put it in for 2-3 years, didn't get in. So it has a lot to do with lobbying, has a lot to do with finance, has a lot to do with politics, but also has to do with medical considerations. So those are the kind of the parties that are included in the basket negotiations. Okay, so I'm cutting up the challenges here into these 4 major challenges. Obviously the financial challenge. One that I'm most concerned about is the 2-tier system, which means that there's a lot of private health going on, and as the deputy director of a hospital, more and more physicians going to private practice and leaving the public service. And I'll candidly show some numbers so you can see what the huge disparity is between public practice and private practice. The fact that we're not doing enough with our data. We're a centralized country in terms of Ministry of Health and HMOs, but there's a huge problem because each of these have their own data systems and they don't really want to share with the other parties, nor do they want to share with Ministry of Health, because that may cut down on their ability to negotiate things. So everyone's very discreet about their data, which causes a lot of problems. And last but not least, what do we do about physicians? And I'll talk a bit about that. So I said that there are generally 4 HMOs or sick funds. And in addition to these hospitals, some of the HMOs own their own hospitals. So Clalit Health Services owns about 5 hospitals, Maccabi owns 2 hospitals, 1 is public. So you have, like I said, a lot of small organizations with a lot of overhead and high administrative costs. Generally speaking, people who come to Clalit Services to be CEOs left very big organizations like El Al. So they're expecting large 6-7 digit salaries, and obviously they're expected to run them well. Not always happens. So you have huge administrative costs, and you have very complex services that the medical aspect is only a small part of it compared to the, and we have low accountability. So like I said, at the end of the year, most sick funds come to the Ministry of Health or directly to the Ministry of Finance saying, listen, we're sorry we lost a lot of money, but you know how it is, it's expensive to run healthcare, can you please give us 60, 80, 100 million shekels? And the answer is always yes, because it can't be no. So it's as if the Ministry of Finance is a bit of a hostage in terms of the sick funds, because no one can allow himself to see them collapse. We don't have any gatekeeping, so we have high usage of specialists, and specialists often refer to high technology procedures. So there's no gatekeeping, which just keeps prices up a lot higher. So just some suggestions that I think one of the things that we have to do is leave the Ministry of Health as a regulator and stop having it as its own, as an owner of its own services. It causes a lot of conflict of interest. Some of them are financial. For example, it's worth the Ministry of Health's while to have people hospitalized here and not in one of the hospitals that belong to the sick fund. So there are a lot of conflicts here. So I think one of the things is to sell, in a way, the government-run hospitals to any of the 4 existing sick funds, which already have all their administrative branches, etc., so that can reduce costs. That's one of the things. The second thing is gatekeeping. We've actually rocked the pendulum a bit too far from where we were. 20 years ago, there was basically a lot of gatekeeping, and you couldn't really see a specialist without going through your GP. Today, you can go see whoever you want. So we need more gatekeeping, and maybe we should add some kind of out-of-pocket, kind of mandatory, somewhere between symbolic and something that will be felt if you do want to go directly to a specialist. So you have that option, but generally, all referrals to specialists should probably go through gatekeeping. One of the things I'll talk about a bit more is minimizing private medicine. I'll talk about that in a minute. And maybe go from pay per service or pay per procedure in order to reduce volumes to pay per diagnosis, which is a system in which you get reimbursed not by the procedure you did, but by the diagnosis that the patient received. So there's less incentive on the physician's side to increase volume and to go for expensive procedures. So that's also an option, paying per diagnosis. And what we need more is top-down planning. Israel is a very bottom-up country. I'll give myself as an example. I completed my training in psychiatry. I did a fellowship at the University of Toronto, a few years in addiction psychiatry, came back, had these great ideas, and started establishing stuff, which is great from a narcissistic point of view and from a financial point of view, but it's not right because it's a lot of bottom-up, and it's good that there's bottom-up initiative, but there has to be a lot more top-down planning because what you get is either things that are established in silo, in parallel, in different places, again, a lot of overhead, a lot of cost, or things that are established by someone who has, fierce passion, but doesn't know a lot about business, and is establishing a service which 2, 3, 5 years down the line may not be sustainable. And I'm one of thousands of examples of people coming back from fellowships abroad saying, I have a great idea, why don't I do something with it? So we have to have a bit more top-down planning and not just things coming from the grassroots level. In terms of data, like I said, potentially we're supposed to have, and we do have in part thanks to the fact that Clalit Health Services covers 50% of the population, which is about 4 million people. And Professor Schuster mentioned that we have great epi data, epidemiological research coming out of their data mining. But we're 8 million people, and there's no reason that the data systems shouldn't be converged. So if I'm working in a hospital, for example, and I receive a patient, because the Ministry of Health hospitals are separate, I don't actually see his file. So we don't have a universal magnetic card, or if I move from one HMO to the other, then I can get my file on print, but the physician I'm starting out with won't be able to see it, and vice versa. A patient of mine who's discharged to ambulatory care, his physician will receive my letter of discharge, but not his whole file. So we need that, and we need some kind of integrated pharmaceutical system because we have an opioid problem which is emerging here, a stimulant problem, Ritalin, methylphenidate, a benzodiazepine problem. So we need a universal data system as well, and we need to include pharmacies in that. Physicians are a huge challenge here. We have a bad tendency in Israel to look for the gold standard no matter where it is and say we want to copy that. Our training in Israel starts later because of Army service, and our residency programs are just about the longest in the world. So for example, my training in psychiatry is generally 6 months longer than my colleagues in the States. Cardiothoracic surgery is about a year to 1.5 years longer than most countries. So we start later. We have longer specialties. We want to specialize and be of very high quality, so a lot of us travel abroad, take loans, get into debt in order to achieve more specialties. So by the time we come back, we're kind of old and poor. What that means is that we want some kind of payback for all the years that we've spent. That gives rise to what I call the pad-of-pocket system. The pad-of-pocket system has a lot to do with frustrated physicians who've spent a few years abroad saying, well, that guy makes 250 grand a year, why shouldn't I? And now they are. But they're doing it after hours, in the evening, which means that they're running away from the hospital a lot earlier. Used to be that at 12 o'clock, you couldn't see a lot of senior physicians in the hospital until 2 years ago when there was a physician strike. And during the negotiations with the Ministry of Health, they included a mandatory, whatever it's called, a time card. So when I arrive to work today, I, anyone working in a factory, have to pass my card so they'll know that I'm there till 4 p.m. At 4:30 p.m. we started the clinic till about 9 p.m. So again, that is a huge challenge. A lot don't return. A lot see the Holy Grail abroad in the States, in Canada, less so in Europe, but it happens. And in a sense, some of the best and brightest aren't returning. So just in terms of financing, the physician's training is all shouldered by the Ministry of Health because they own all the hospitals where all the residency aside from family medicine happens. The HMOs are only benefiting from money spent in governmental hospitals. So if the hospitals would move to the HMOs, then it would be one financial system, and the HMO would have its own incentive to conduct effective training, cost-effective training, maybe shorter trainings. They have to be up to par with universal standards. But in trying to recruit these people back, for example, by giving incentives before someone travels abroad, say you'll get 250,000 shekels once you return, and those are starting to happen in a way. So we have to reduce duration of training and additional burdening requirements. I'm completing my master's in 3 days. It has been great, but to be honest, an individual in the States with a parallel job to mine probably wouldn't require an MHA. So not only are our trainings longer, we have, like I said, a tendency to find ways to make it as difficult as possible. You know, if there's any additional requirement that any country in the world requests, then Israeli Ministry of Health is going to bring it on. So, you know, we're kind of getting older and doing more and more and paying for education, and we get a lot out of it, but we have to reduce those additional burdens. The more we establish additional subspecialties within Israel, I think we'll be better off. Because you'll have less people going out, more people staying within the system, and I think we can already do that. I mean, the last 20, 30 years, we've accumulated quite a body of knowledge in which we can do that, and we have to do something about the salaries. I'll just give you an example, and to be honest, I generally thought that people from the States aren't very candid about salaries, but Richard kind of primed the whole thing. So I'll just give myself literally as an example. So I'm a deputy director of a hospital, and my salary is generally about 45,000 shekels per month, which sounds like a lot, but tax is very high. You get a 48% tax on the last about 15,000, so that's very high. Cost of living here is high. My 3 kids cost a ton of money. So that's the salary. Now, just to put it into perspective, because I have a very specific specialty in addiction, and because I make a lot of noise, in private practice, what I get is 2,200 shekels per appointment. So that means if I work 5 hours a week, I would earn the same as I do working 48 hours a week in my public job. So now you can see why we're losing a lot of people, because basically what I do in my private practice is I fund my hobby of being a deputy director of a hospital. That is basically the way I see it. So I'm working in my practice in the evening in order for me to do a public job, but people like myself and Gil, who heads the ENT in Rambam, are gradually getting tired and leaving public jobs to the private sector. And again, we're already in a 2/3, 1/3 ratio. This is actually being filmed, isn't it? So we're actually we're in a 2/3, 1/3 kind of system, and we're concerned that it'll slowly go towards the 50-50 and maybe reach a tipping point in which services will be private. So this is not a small thing. Increasing the salaries and maybe having people commit full time, saying, you know what, we'll add 25% to your salary, but you work only in one place, only in the hospital, and you commit yourself not to work outside, we will benefit from it eventually. And additional incentives, things like time for research, etc., academic. So, generally, 2 additional points. Like I said, one is that we tend to try to copy-paste things which are a huge burden. One of the things that my hospital is dealing with now is something called the JCI accreditation, which is an acronym for a huge headache. It is absolutely horrendous. Now, as opposed to what may happen in the States, we get instructions, because we're owned by the Ministry of Health, that within 2 years we have to go through the JCI accreditation, which is a lot of administrative work without one administrator, without 1 hour of administration being added. So instead of copy and paste from the US, I think we have to apply. This is one of the things you said at the beginning of the course. You cannot copy paste, and we're doing that too much. We have to invent health systems here. Denmark, by the way, did that. We just met a guy from Denmark a week ago in our hospital. He managed to convince the Ministry of Health in Denmark to drop the accreditation. He said, look, it's going to be a huge burden, not particularly effective. We're going to go into 2 to 4 years of having this huge headache and not taking care of patients. Let's just drop it. And he managed to convince them. We need to do more of that. We need to establish our own independent thinking in terms of health systems and not copy-paste what we see in the US or in Europe. And we have the obvious challenges, which I think to an extent can be maybe treated either through incentives. We need more geriatric training in family practice, etc., and incentives for working in the periphery, which is a relative term. After working in Canada, it's hard to call Tiberias a periphery, but compared to it is. So this is just a short summary. We're in a good spot in Israel, so we have a good starting point. We're generally doing okay. Not enough financial accountability, and I think we need to transfer from Ministry of Health as an owner to Ministry of Health as a regulator and have the 4 HMOs, or maybe even more, having it competitive, reducing administrative costs. We have to deal with the threat that the 2-tier system is posing on our country, which is beneficial for the physicians, but not for the patients. And I'm not sure for the physicians in the long term, I have to admit, either. And we need more incentives to keep the physicians in the public health system. Thank you.
Wow, we all went through the Israeli introduction to the Israeli system, and it was nothing as interesting as
Thank you very much. Thank
very,
you.
very, very great presentation. I really
Thank you.
enjoyed it.
I think I should teach the.
I actually thought about that too, and said, wow, I mean, this is an excellent, excellent presentation. So I have 2 questions that are related. The first one is on the issue of data.
Right.
Now, since we'll be recording, I won't mention any names, but so I was, about a semester ago, I was exposed to Clalit Research Institute, working with, some of the people there, the whole big data,
Right.
right? So, but you saying these HMOs work in silos and they each own their own data,
Yeah.
with the fear of maybe exposing or compromising themselves, or maybe just intellectual property? Is that
Both, I have to say. For example, let me give you a great example. Sometimes I talk in the parliament about things like opioid addiction, things like that. We've been requesting, I work for the Ministry of Health at the hospital, but we've been requesting data for about 18 months now from separate HMOs. First thing is we don't own them, so they don't owe us anything. Second of all, there is huge liability here. So just for example, an HMO that discloses that the number of opioid prescriptions that they're handing out is, twofold what others are liable to a lot of criticism in terms of the media, maybe even legal liability. So people are extremely protective of their data. Clalit, because it's big enough, plays its own game. Not only does it cover 50% of the population, it owns 5 hospitals. So it can even do that inpatient outpatient analysis, kind of follow up what happens to people discharged after a hip replacement 6 years later. Well, they can give you a reasonable answer. Others can't.
So would it work if you had like a regulatory framework similar to what they have in the US, like HIPAA? Where you've got like the HIPAA,
No.
I forgot the acronym, the HIPAA Act.
Health information,
Right.
HIPPA, I don't know what.
It's like a disclosure for confidentiality.
Right.
To the best of my understanding, what that entails is the confidentiality part, meaning that you have to put forth the health system, which means that it won't leak, but it doesn't require you to share.
Right. Oh, I see.
So it's not going to answer the same thing.
Yeah. Okay. And then the second question I was going to ask was this startup nation dilemma.
Yeah.
When you talked about the more top down, so you said
That we need more top down.
Right. You wanted more top down.
Yeah.
But now you've got this startup nation dilemma.
Well, the startup nation is in the private sector. When you introduce that startup nation mentality to the public sector, it doesn't work as well. Because innovations are only one part. You need sustainability. You have to put forth systems, for example. In IT, you can establish a startup company and 95% fold within about 5 years. Okay, so people receive their salary, they have some angels funding them, but they're going to fold. If you do that for the public sector, what happens 3-4 years later? You've spent public money, which you haven't spent elsewhere, and if that folds, it's not an oligarch's money, it's taxpayers' money. So you need a lot more top down, because innovation is only one aspect, but you need financial planning in the long term, which is very scarce in Israel. Not enough long-term thinking.
Okay.
That's
Thank you for your presentation. My question is your suggestion that if hospitals can be shifted to all the HMOs, what was in the philosophy of the Ministry of Public Health to own this hospital?
Well, I think philosophy may be a big word. It was a lot of reality which required it, in a sense. a lot has to do with territory. Hospitals were one way to establish ownership over a territory. So you had Clalit Health Services,